because we have votes, we also have money to spend in this economy. We can also make a big change and move the needle in all plans regarding Kenya. So I hope that in future, Mr. Speaker, that the President's addresses will also address us, because we are waiting to be publicly seen and heard by the executive. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to address this House. Mr. Speaker, on the motion that has been brought before this House or moved by the majority whip, Mr. Speaker, as you will notice, it's referred to as a procedural motion, and that's what it is, procedural. It is a tool designed by the Constitution to give the President an opportunity to come back and account to this House on the mandate that has been placed on him by the Constitution and ultimately by the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, when the President comes to address the House, the symbolic address is not just to the House, it is an address to the representatives of the people. Mr. Speaker, those have been elected by the people of Kenya to represent them in the House, Mr. Speaker. And if you will notice, Mr. Speaker, in the functions of the President, that comes in as the top function of the President. And that shows just how important that tool is, not just to the House itself, but also to the Constitution and also to the people of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, having noted that, then it shows just how important this procedural motion is and why it cannot be trivialized into politics, Mr. Speaker. Because when the President comes to address the House, and as he addresses the Kenyan through the legislative arm, Mr. Speaker, he's coming to give an account of what he has done with the mandate and the implementation of the promise that have been given to the Kenya, especially during the election period, Mr. Speaker. It's an address that deals with the day-to-day issues that Kenyans are going through: health, education, security, issues, food security, Mr. Speaker, issues that deal with general security or insecurity of the nation, budgetary constraints or budgets that Kenya is running on, Mr. Speaker. It deals with the whole mandate that the executive is working on, Mr. Speaker. And as such, it becomes an important tool through which this House, Mr. Speaker, can also use to address the constituents, because these leaders also are called to account by the people, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's very easy for the members of Parliament to put a big focus on the presidents and the address without remembering that equally, as you cascade downwards, the members of Senate and members of the National Assembly will be required by Kenyans to equally give an account with what they have done as a mandate, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, when I listened to one of our colleagues saying that members should address these issues in 2 minutes, then I knew we are misunderstanding the procedural motion that is before this House, Mr. Speaker. One of the things we should not use is to politicize the presidential address. And I'm in total agreement when there is a proposal that the President should sit in, actually hear the members give the feedback, because that feedback is a performance appraisal, Mr. Speaker. And it should be objective, because if the presidency succeeds, the nation succeeds. If the presidency fails, the nation fails, Mr. Speaker. And the minute we recognize that, Mr. Speaker, we will be more keen to come in and give objective criticism when that debate is being done. Give commendations where it is due, give objective criticism where it is needed, Mr. Speaker, and improve the process along the way. The minute we understand how such a tool is supposed to help governance issues, then, Mr. Speaker, it will come to yield for the Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion, and I rise to say that it should not be trivialized, and the tool should be dealt with as an important tool and given sufficient time, Mr. Speaker. One other thing I wish to note, Mr. Speaker, ni kwamba Senator mmoja kati yetu, Senator Wakoli,
Senator Veronica, you are totally out of order. You need to stick on the language that you chose first to make a contribution.
Mr. Speaker, why I switched that language and I stand advised, Mr. Speaker, was to commend Senator Wakoli Wafula for being very good in Swahili. And I wanted to state it in Swahili and to say that when he's next taking tea among the senators, he should be taking 1 minute to instruct the senators on how to address the nation sometimes using the Kiswahili language and promoting the Kiswahili language among the Kenyans. That's why I was switching the language, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Kavindu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this motion, procedural motion that has been brought by Majority Whip. Mr. Speaker, it's very important for the address of both houses by the President, and this, we get to know what is manifesto and what he plans for the country. And again, also, Mr. Speaker, I do support that he should also, after the address, sit in the House and listen to the debates about his address, because this one will enable him to know what he has been able to do and what he has not been able to do, because many of the times, Mr. Speaker, leaders are surrounded by people who only tell them what they want to hear, and only want to praise them even when they have not done some things. They don't have the strength to tell them the truth. And this one will enable him to know the truth, and this one will not just be bad on him or for the country, but also to help him fulfill all what he has promised to do to the citizens. And we are here to build Kenya, all of us, whether in opposition or in the ruling party. We are here to build Kenya and come together and make sure that our people get what they need at the right time when they need it. The economy right now is very low, very down. Actually, I don't know if the rest of the members of Parliament and even Senate are getting the same calls that I get every day, for people asking for school fees, for people asking for food, for people asking for medication, and so on and so forth. And so we need to come together and know the way forward for our country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support.
Senator Mundigi.
Asante, Bwana Spika. Naunga mkono ambaye ya ile mambo tunazungumzia hapa, vile tunazungumza tupatiwe muda ipunguzwe, ndio kila mtu katika Senate, tuko maseneta 67 na sisi wote hakuna hataki kuchangia kwa sababu tumetoka masinani na tunajua vile kunaendelea. Na unga mkono kwa sababu pia nakumbuka kama mwaka jana wakati rais alizungumza mambo mengi sana ambayo economy, na pia alikuwa anaongea mambo ya afya masinani, na hiyo tumeona ametimiza, na akaongea tena mambo ya kilimo na tunaona vile mambo inaendelea. Na pia wakati tulichangia na tukamunga mkono, tutakuwa tunachangia tuone kama kuna mambo inaweza pandilika, kama sasa kutoka wakati hiyo, wakati tuliingia kama upande ya makadamia ilikuwa inatoka shilingi 30 na sasa inatoka shilingi 100 na kitu. Kwa hiyo kuchangia mambo ya rais ni kitu muhimu sana. Pia tunakumbuka wakati ule alisema mambo ya kilimo, akaongea mambo ya fertilizer ikarundi kutoka 6,500 na ikawa imekuja 2,500, na tumeona vile kilimo inaendelea mambo mingi. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri muda ipunguzwe na pia tuwe tukichangia mambo mengi. Pia mambo ingine ningetaka kuwa tutakuwa nachangia ni vile tutaweka maanane mambo ya kilimo, kila county iwe ikipata maji ya kulima na vitu zingine, ndio tuweze kuona mazao mazuri. Kitu kingine tutachangia ni kuwa tutajua kama hiyo mambo yote tutafanya, mambo ya pesa mkononi itarudi namna gani na tutaweza kukaa namna gani. Pia tulisikia alichangia mambo ya economy, na pia tumeona vile kumekuwa na shinda, na pia akasema vile mandeni imekuwa mingi na amekuwa akilipa mandeni, na pia akisaidia county, na tumeona county nyingi ikipokea pesa, sio kama miaka ile ingine. Tumeona ikipokea kila mwezi, kutoka mwezi wa 7 kila mwezi inapata pesa yake. Na pia mambo ingine tutachangia ni mambo ya pia Kenya yetu, vijana wetu na wasichana vijana wamewachiliwa na mambo ya pombe na dawa ya kulevya. Kuna wakati utafika ukute Kenya haina vijana ama haina familia, kwa sababu kama hiyo mambo kama haitachukuliwa hatua. Ndio tuone kama kuna uwezo, kama kila county inaweza patiwa pesa ya kuwa ikipeleka hao vijana kwa mafunzo mambo ya madawa ya kulevya na pombe, ndio waweze kukaa vizuri kwa familia zao. Kwa hiyo asante Bwana Spika, naunga mkono.
Senator Miraj.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kuweza kunipa fursa hii adhimu na mimi niweze kuunga mkono mswada uliopendekezwa na kiongozi wa wengi, kiranja wa wengi hapa bungeni Bwana Halwale, ili kuweze kupunguzwa muda, ili kila mjumbe aweze kuchangia katika speech ya rais anapozungumza na sisi wabunge ama wajumbe wa taifa hili. Bwana Spika, nimesikia wenzangu wamechangia na nimenukuu mingi nikiwa pale lounge, na nikasema na mimi nije nipeane changizo zangu. Bwana Spika, nataka kuwakumbusha wajumbe wenzangu ya kwamba tuko hapa kama mkono mmoja miongoni mwa mikono mitatu mwa serikali yetu ya Kenya. Na hatuko hapa kuwa wapinzani na wenye serikali. Tuko hapa na majukumu matatu ya kuwakilisha wananchi wa Kenya, kusimamia rasilimali zao, na pia kuwatungia sheria za kulinda na kusongeza taifa letu mbele. Sisi kama wajumbe katika bunge la Seneti, tuko na jukumu moja kubwa la kusimamia gatuzi zetu 47 katika taifa la Kenya. Lakini ni jambo la kusikitisha sana kuona kwamba rais anapokuja kutuzungumzia yale ambao ameweza kuyafanya kama mkono mmoja wa serikali, the executive, sisi tunaanza kukejeli yale ambao amekuja kutueleza. Yangu ni kuwapa ushauri na saha ndugu zangu sote tulioko hapa. Tuko na jukumu katika taifa hili kama viongozi kuweza kupeana mwelekeo na kutoa suluhu ya matatizo ambayo yanatukabili sisi kama taifa. Ni vizuri sana Wakenya wanatuangalia kule nje Bwana Spika, katika mirengo tofauti. Lakini ni muhimu sisi wenyewe tujue lile jukumu kubwa ambalo limetuleta katika bunge hili. Ni kuwezesha kuwa wasimamizi wa rasilimali za Wakenya, kuwa viongozi ambao wanaona tatizo lipo wapi. Yuko kiongozi mmoja hapa amezungumzia masuala ya KBC. Na sisi kama viongozi wadogo Bwana Spika, ambao ndio sasa mwanzo tunaanza ulezi, tuko na watoto wetu katika taasisi hii. Watoto wetu wameanza kusoma Bwana Spika, na mpaka sasa hakuna mwelekeo wa kuonesha watoto hawa watakwenda vipi na kuelekea vipi. Kando na kuwa wengine wetu tunasemekana kwamba ni vibaraka wa serikali, mimi nataka kuwakumbusha wajumbe wenzangu hapa, mimi ni mjumbe wa kike ambaye nimepewa fursa kuweza kuja katika nyumba hii kuweza kuongea masuala ya kijinsia na kuwasaidia kuongeza na kutilia pondo pale ambapo naona kuna sheria zinatungwa na zinatuumiza sisi kama kina mama, ama nichangie kuonesha ni njia hii tukiifuata itasaidia kina mama na vijana katika taifa hili la Kenya. Nataka kuwaambia ndugu zangu ambao wakienda mashinani Bwana Spika, wanasema kwamba wajumbe wa upinzani hawapawi fursa sawa na wajumbe ambao wako upande wa serikali kutunga sheria. Huo ni urongo wa mchana. Hapa kila mtu ako na fursa ya kutunga sheria na kuchangia hisia zake ili kuleta suluhu katika taifa la Kenya. Tuko hapa ili kuweza kuwasaidia wa Kenya.
What is a point of order, Senator Eddie?
Speaker, I rise on the point of order, number 104 for, and also actually limiting debates, actually, Mr. Speaker. I think that it's not in order, and I never want to interrupt my sister, Senator Miraj, because I enjoy the tantalizing Swahili that she brings into this house. But I think that, Mr. Speaker, the topic that we have here and the discussion that we have here is whether we limit the debate, the debates on the presidential speech, and it's not in order for the wonderful senator from Mombasa and nominated to actually suggest that there are members from the opposition side who are, claiming some claims that she knows best, which have got totally no relevance to this particular conversation, Mr. Speaker. So could she just limit a debate to the matter at hand and not the isia za what she calls the isia za watu wa huku? Asante sana.
Again, Senator Eddy, what is your the standing order that you're relying on?
114. Doctor, imputing wrong motive on our side for what we haven't claimed until this conversation at all.
Very well, Senator Miraj. According to your statement, you are suggesting that members of the opposition are out there lamenting. They're not being given an opportunity to present bills, and that the favoritism is towards the majority side. Is that a statement of fact? If not, you may have to proceed with the draw.
Asante Bwana Spika, na kwa kweli ni statement ambayo nimeizungumza nikiwa na ushahidi nayo na nitaileta katika bunge hili. Asante Bwana Eddy Okech, takuletea ushahidi Bwana Spika. Lakini yangu tu ni kuweka wazi. Naam.
If you're unable to substantiate that, I'll give you an opportunity to do so tomorrow.
Inshallah. Asante Bwana Spika. Yangu ni kwamba Bwana Spika, nikizungumzia na nikimalizia, sisi hapa tumekuja kama Wakenya ili kuleta suluhu na kutatua matatizo ambayo yanatukabili kama Wakenya. Ni vibaya sana kuona viongozi wa upinzani, ndugu zetu ambao tunakunywa nao chai na tunapiga tu story kama kawaida, tunapofika katika jumba hili wanaleta siasa nyingi. Mimi niko tayari rais aambiwe pale anafanya makosa ili huduma kwa wananchi ziweze kuafikiwa kwa malengo. Asante Bwana Spika.
Senator Mariam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, first of all, Happy New Year to you and other colleagues of mine, of senators who are around. Mr. Speaker, this motion about President's address is more of President addressing implementation of his plan. Mr. Speaker, the last President address, the President omitted ASAL counties, specifically pastoralist. So I urge to the President, this time he will cater for the ASAL counties for the implementations. On that scenario, on that issue, there is a road which has been given to Mande Elwak to Mande Ramo, which Senator is financed by...
Mariam,
yes.
Senator Mariam, if you look at your order paper, you'll see the motion that is being discussed now. We are not debating the address by the President that was done last year. We are debating the motion as read to you and as moved by the majority leader. So just speak to that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I know it is a motion for the limitations, But because the president's address is more of implementation of his plan. So now when he's doing his plan address, I'm just reminding that last time there is omission of asset like counties. Now I predict there will be implementation of some activities in ASAL area. I know the motion is about the limitation of President's address. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Gloria Oroba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this motion on the limitation of debate on the President's address. Mr. Speaker, I think I want to echo one of the statements that, it must have been Senator Agnes Kavindu who has suggested that perhaps also the President should sit in to listen to some of the criticism, the objective criticism from this House. Mr. Speaker, I think for me, what I want to say is that I believe that in his presence, most of our senators, fellow senators, who sometimes just criticize for purposes of criticizing without any objective wisdom, will then be able to speak truthfully in front of the electorate on matters that truly count. So that is a very good suggestion from Senator Agnes. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that in this, we tend to underestimate the communication from the President. And sometimes, and I remember way back, I must have been young, very young, when Kenyans were complaining that they had a president who never used to talk, who never used to communicate, and so people were in the dark. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate His Excellency William Samoei Ruto for actually keeping the communications lines open. And it's not only through the presidential address, but through the daily communication that he has with the electorate, both from the executive and on ground as he goes to speak to the people. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, I just urge that in this particular address that is upcoming, that he may also communicate in terms of the gender agenda, Mr. Speaker. It is far too long that the two-third gender rule has not been spoken of, Mr. Speaker. Not in the presidential address, not in the constant communication that we get from the executive, Mr. Speaker. And it is very unfortunate because I do know that a lot of work is being done by the executive, by the president, to ensure that the Kenya Kwanza Women Charter is being implemented. But Mr. Speaker, there's been very limited communication of the same in terms of the gender agenda. Mr. Speaker, I also hope to hear that the policies and some of the work that is being done in that space of women empowerment is actually going to be communicated this time. Because, Mr. Speaker, some of us who are nominated to represent women in this House, people ask us, what is happening? You went there to represent women, to push for the agenda of women, but the government is quiet. Government is not quiet. It's just that there is no communication that is being put out that is clear, that is intentional, to actually inform Kenyans on what the president and the cabinet is doing in terms of empowering women and having women being represented in these spaces. So, Mr. Speaker, in the upcoming presidential address, I do hope that this particular message is going to be communicated. And even as we look forward to the conference on the status of women that is happening in New York, we want to hear the president echoing issues that are affecting women, not only issues that come up. For instance, now there is a lot of talk. We are celebrating, we are mourning, we are not celebrating, we are mourning the lives of the lost, of our lost women who have been killed through femicide, Mr. Speaker. We want to hear what those offices that have been mandated to represent women and to protect women through the cabinet, through the executive, what they are doing. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion because I do believe that all 16 nominated women in the House will then get time to speak and air their views in terms of the gender agenda, and also to be able to question or to objectively criticize on the work that is being done in that space, on the representation of women and the policies and the projects that the Kenya Kwanza government has for the women of Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Munyahaji.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia hoja ya kuweka muda katika kujadili hotuba ya rais ambayo inatarajiwa nafikiri mwezi wa 4. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza nachukua fursa hii kukutakia wewe binafsi na maseneta wote mwaka mpya, mwaka 2024 wenye manufaa na afya njema katika mwaka huu mpya. Mheshimiwa Spika, pili, tuamshukuru Mwenyezi Mungu kwamba ametufikisha mwaka mpya na tuko tayari kufanya kazi katika kujenga taifa na kuhakikisha kwamba maisha ya Wakenya yamebadilika. Mheshimiwa Spika, hoja hii ni muhimu sana kwa sababu tumeona kwamba mwaka uliokwisha watu wengi hawakupata fursa ya kuweza kuchangia hotuba ya rais. Na hotuba ile, Mheshimiwa Spika, ilikuwa na mambo mengi ambayo ni kinyume na hali halisi ilivyo katika nchi yetu ya Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni kweli kwamba wengi wetu huwa tunaikosoa hotuba hii na kwa hakika ndio kazi yetu, kwa sababu sisi tumechaguliwa kama wawakilishi wa wananchi, sisi ndio macho ya wananchi. Lakini ikiwa kuna jambo ambalo limezungumzwa ama limefanywa ambalo halilingani na sheria ama halilingani na hali halisi ilivyo, ni wajibu wetu Mheshimiwa Spika kukosoa na kueleza ukweli halisi ulivyo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, tutapata fursa ya kuweza kukosoa hotuba hii, na wengi wetu wale ambao wako katika upande wa serikali wao wanajiona kwamba ni serikali zaidi kuliko wale ambao wako katika mkono wa serikali, yani executive. Lakini tukiangalia majukumu yetu katika katiba kifungu cha 96 ni kwamba sisi ndio wa macho ya wananchi katika serikali, na sisi ni jukumu letu, mbali na kwamba tunatunga sheria na kukosoa serikali, na pia ndio waangalizi wa mali ya umma katika mikono ya serikali, ambao wananchi binafsi hawezi kufanya hivyo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naunga mkono hoja hii na ningependa kukomea hapo. Asante.
Senator Chute.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Let me first of all take this opportunity to send my condolences to the family, friends of Kelvin Kiptum, and also take this opportunity to send my condolences to Senator Khalwale and the family of Kizito Moi, our majority leader. Poleni sana. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this motion on limitation of presidential address or speech. Honorable Speaker, in support of Senator Khalwale's motion, I would want to say the presidential speech is of a symbolic importance for this country. It is an occasion of utmost pomp and tradition. It is a time the president puts agenda before the country. It is not only the parliament, the whole country are listening and hearing what the president says. And it also time he puts his agenda in order to influence public opinion. Mr. Speaker, the responsibility of this Senate, first of all, is to represent, to legislate, and to oversight. When the president gives his speech, it is the responsibility of each person in this house to question the agenda of the president. It is not only the responsibility of the other side of the aisle to ask questions. Each and every person has a right to ask any question that he thinks or she thinks is not going the way this country should go. It is always good to listen to the debate when the president is giving the speech, so that you can debate wisely. And my fellow senators here have been trying to say, when you talk about presidential speech, it is not the responsibility of each side only. And I have seen a tradition where people criticize, they critique what the president says also. Of late, Mr. Speaker, the president mentioned the issue of judiciary. And I've seen many senators and members of parliament in this country going around in wedding places, in harambes, and funerals, talking about judiciary. And I would want to say, if the president says something, if he says whether it is right or wrong, there is no point or reason why one side of the government should attack the other side of the government. And I think when the president gives speeches, if you have anything to ask, if you have anything to say, each and every person in this house should say, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. Asante sana.
Senator Boni, you may proceed to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to reply, and I want to thank all colleagues for the issues that you have raised. Of greatest interest is what was brought up by the Senator for Tana River, who first proposed the need for us to make this debate on the presidential speech inclusive to the extent that the president should be requested to be sitting in during that debate. Mr. Speaker, this quickly invites you and the House to think about changing the standing orders. If we change the standing orders to allow cabinet secretaries to come to the House, we can also change standing orders to ask the president to sit in during debate. I think this is a very innovative sort of thinking. We should not just be talking to the air. We want the president to listen to us, and because there are many presidents in waiting in this House, it's good for him to hear what the future presidents that will succeed him will be commending on his thoughts and programs. With those many remarks, I reply.
Now, honorable senators, pursuant to Standing Order 84-2, it is my determination that this matter does not affect counties, and therefore voting shall be by voice. And I'll proceed to put the question. That pursuant to Standing Order 27-6, the Senate resolves that the debate on the motion on the presidential address shall be limited to a maximum of 3 sitting days with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, excluding the mover in moving and replying, who shall be limited to 30 minutes in either case, and the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader shall be limited to 30 minutes each. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next, order clerk.
Order number 11, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 46 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act and for connected purposes. Order number 12, the Nuts and Oil Crops Development Bill, Senate Bills number 47 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the production, processing, marketing, and distribution of nuts and oil crops and their products, establish the Nuts and Oil Crops Board, provide a framework for the nuts and oil crops farming, development, and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 13, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 2 Bill, Senate Bills number 52 of 2023. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Constitution of Kenya. Order number 14, the Water Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bills number 33 of 2023, second reading.
Thank you, Honorable Senators. On this bill, this is a resumption of debate which was interrupted on Thursday, 30th November 2023. And from my records, Senator Andy Okech and a balance of 2 minutes. So if you are allowed to proceed with 2 minutes, please do. Senator Okech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm actually happy to see you. Happy New Year. And I hope that this year you can be a little bit generous to make it 4 minutes. Just because perhaps people did not understand what I said the other time, just to recalibrate.
Start driving, I'll see whether you are engaging the writing gears.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill actually seeks to make a number of amendments to the Water Act 2016. And I did raise before that I had serious concern with this bill, because if you look at Part 2 of Schedule 4, if you start with Index 10, where you will find that the counties are given the power to look at policy angles on water matters by the national government. And then if you were to look at Index 11, where water and sanitation services are purely devolved as functions of the county. And this bill is one of the bills that I wish that the entire Senate, or rather all senators, were in the House to actually look at this bill. The entire last year, Mr. Speaker, we spent a lot of time as the committee on, the CPIC committee, dealing with issues of water in counties. And one of the things that we realized, Mr. Speaker, is that a lot of structures that have been put in place that tend to be national bodies have completely hampered the idea of making sure that water services is effective and efficient in counties. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, is one of those bills that actually seeks to claw back on devolution, Mr. Speaker. You know, if you look at section, I might not mention all of them because I have no time. I talked passionately about this bill before. But if you look at something like section 30, Mr. Speaker, it introduces Water Regulatory Authority, which is a national body with so much powers that takes powers out of the counties. If you look at section 31, Mr. Speaker, it also introduced another Water Regulatory Board whose membership and composition, Mr. Speaker, is purely negating the idea of devolution of water. If you look at section 65, Mr. Speaker, waterwork agencies are given more power on dealing with bulk water. And Mr. Speaker, the waterwork agencies have been at the core of making, WSPs, water service providers, Mr. Speaker, not be effective. If you look at how they take big loans, so the name of these WSPs, if you look at how they sit a lot of assets of these WSPs in their own balance sheets, Mr. Speaker, is all chaos that I think that our committee at CPIC has been working tirelessly to be able to deal with and remove. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, if you look at section 119, Mr. Speaker, there is introduction of the Water Tribunal. And if you look at the membership, does not in any way empower counties in a sense. The membership does not make any meaning. I want just to invite senators that let us pay a lot.
Give him 1 minute. Only
Even 30 seconds. Mr. Speaker, I just want to invite the entire House that please keenly read this bill and do not allow it to go through, because water is life and it is one of the functions that devolved units have that we must give them full power to be able to control. Every suggestion that I'm seeing here is reversing those powers to the national government and make it impossible for devolved units and county governments to take control of water service provision. So, Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill in its entirety, and I hope that senators will take time to actually read and discern it and understand it and make meaningful decision when it comes to this bill. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddie, you know, as a legislator, you have all the powers to come up with possible amendments that maybe you might like the Senate to consider. That you have that benefit, you have gone through the report keenly. So come up with those amendments or the issues that you need to be revisited, then we can consider as the House. Next is Senator Manzo Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, water is a devolved function. And the Minister of Water directs the policy, and the current Water Act of 2016 was actually due for amendment. And the Department of Water has been struck by a lot of confrontations with the stakeholders, and that's why their regulations never went through, and in fact they ended up in court, and right now there's a lot of confusion. And you see, regulations come from the Act. Now that the Act is going through regulations, amendments, and we have just received this Act now from National Assembly, now that's a devolved function, it has come to us. It would have originated from us or would have originated from every house. It is very important that we make sure that devolution is taken care of in this Act. Unfortunately, most of the amendments, which are really mangled up, and a very professional job was most probably not done on this, it is important to look at each section with a lot of keen interest. When you go to the practicality of its implementation, there are a lot of issues. Mr. Speaker, in my county, is Twake Dam, which should have been completed years ago. But out of mismanagement, and the Minister of Water and the Minister of Finance, Treasury, there has been postponement year after year of the completion date of this particular dam. The contractor is actually very frustrated, having not be able to work alone, has to work with the ministry, and for especially money delays. As soon as there was a new government, and on the rearrangement of budgets, 5 billion shillings were removed from this project, which is internationally funded. It's not funded from here. And by the time we got that money back to Twake Dam project, another 1 billion was removed again, by National Assembly Budgeting Committee. And this keeps on creating confusion. First of all, change of administration. When there is change of administration ministers, the government enjoys perpetual continuity. There's no way, when there's a new government, such a serious project will be interrupted. And this goes into a lot of other things which has happened with the Minister of Water. Hence, the regulations which should have come to this House never did, went only to National Assembly, purported to have been implemented, and then stakeholders went to court for lack of proper public participation. And the court is insist on the matter. But there has been a proposal that, so that the sector stops suffering, that parties come together, we register consent, because this house has also been sued. We register consent so that there may be continuity in the country. That is avoided when you make proper law to begin with. And just as Senator Eddie has said, there are so many introductions into this law which reverse the gains of devolution to the national government. In fact, the Constitution has already directed that water services are devolved, and the government can only, the national government can only give, basics, principles on which, or the policy on which this will be implemented. So when you look at many other failed water, projects, like the Northwest Water going to Emali, there's been a dispute between Kajiado County and Makueni County, simply because there's no proper legal framework, nor are there proper regulations. This results out of, when you make a law like this, you don't do stakeholder consultation, public participation, and public participation has become what is in mind of a certain individuals. Public participation should be standard. In fact, I remember in the last house, in the National Assembly, we had a public participation bill, which never saw light of the day as the House expired and has never been, restarted again, which is dealing with a very, very important area of legislation. When we make law, public participation is so critical. But what do we have in this Water Act? We have cosmetic public participation, just for the records, so that it can come to the House, receive a rubber stamp, and proceed to the executive for another signature. So I think we have to take this legislation seriously. And on this particular one, a proper job has not been done. I agree with Senator Okech. This act should be either thoroughly amended, or failure of which it should be sent back to be redone afresh. It does not seek to achieve the purpose of making sure water is supplied to every household in this country. The original plan was to have water, a tap, in every house in the rural areas and in Nairobi. Does that happen in Nairobi? No. Despite the big dam, there are so many cartels, some which break the water pipes and then supply water illegally. That has not been sufficiently catered. Why in Nairobi, with a big dam supply water in Nairobi, there will be insufficient of water? Why do we have more water trucks selling water instead of having the county government of Nairobi supply water and get paid for reasonably in every household? It is a failure of the law. And these amendments have not addressed that problem. These amendments have not devolved these functions to the county of Nairobi and any other county. And therefore, we have a problem that there are more water vendors and more water trucks selling water whose quality is not even certified to Kenyans. And you see, supply of water is what reduces diseases by even more than half. If you have proper supply of water in this country, and Dr. Ahwala will agree with me, then half of the people visiting the hospitals will not do so. And even half of the children die out of dirty, situations of water will not die. And we will cut our budgets far, by, prevention is better than cure. In the hospitals, instead of going to cure people, we will have prevented it by supply. So this is a very important law and cannot be taken as a joke in this House. The way it has been handled in the National Assembly as a joke. It has to be amended thoroughly. It has to take care of the people. It has to go through public participation. Otherwise, we'll end up with another law where Omutata goes to court or any other water stakeholders. As a year now, they are already in court. They are fighting many things. They have been to our committees. They have not been listened to. They have made the petitions here. These petitions will no longer exist, Mr. Speaker, if there was proper public participation by Minister of Water and the COG. A lot of times, COG is being ignored when a law relating to the counties is being made. And that fits the purpose why Senate exists. I've just given the good example of the installation of Thwake Dam, which is just a total mismanagement by people seated in the Ministry of Water and people seated in the Ministry of in Treasury. When you go to Treasury, they take you back to Water. When you go to Ministry of Water, they tell you we are stuck as Treasury. When you follow the documentation, you find a civil servant is holding on it, so that they may be given a bribe, so that a contractor who has done a water project is paid. Then that water project is delayed or is never achieved, Mr. Speaker. So I really want members to look at this legislation carefully. There are very many new interpretations which have been introduced, seeking to define things differently, seeking to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is already round. It can never be square. And therefore, we really must be serious as a Senate, where the National Assembly or the government in its legislative proposal has made an error. We should be bold enough to correct that error in this House. And I don't want to repeat those sections. Most of them have been elaborated very well by Senator Eddy, and I support him. This bill should not be allowed to proceed in this House. Let the Ministry of Water, and luckily there are new guards there. There's a new minister, there's a new PS. Let them get serious. Let them come back to the House and give the country legislation which works. Otherwise, it is very ridiculous to propose a law like this and make joke of devolution and introduce so many boards to manage nothing but to reap money and not to give back to the people. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose.
Next on the line is Senator Wabua Enoch.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to also make a contribution to the Water Amendment Bill, Bill number 33 of 2023, from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, let it go on record that I oppose this bill. Mr. Speaker, in opposing this bill, I want to remind my colleagues, and I've agreed with Senator Alwale that this session we will do serious debate on matters that come to the floor of this House. Mr. Speaker, let us be reminded, all of us, that one of the key responsibilities of this Senate, especially sitting in plenary, is to defend the interests of counties and their governments. So, Speaker, a casual reading of the Constitution, the fourth schedule, section 2, that section lists water services as a fully devolved function, which means then all matters water fall under the jurisdiction of county governments. So, Speaker, one of the things that this bill is trying to do is actually an attempt, a blatant attempt, to claw back on devolution. Because if you interfere with one function that is devolved, then you're essentially clawing back on devolution. Why do I say this, Mr. Speaker? I will narrow my argument to only two issues. First, look at the constitution of the Water Tribunal as proposed in this amendment bill, clause 119. The entire tribunal consists of national government actors, people seated at the national level. And you ask yourself, why did the proposer of this amendment even think of including a member of the county, the Council of Governors subcommittee on water to sit in that tribunal? Because, the Speaker, the purpose of any tribunal is to resolve disputes. If, for instance, there is a dispute between Kitui Water and Nyeri Water, how does the tribunal composed of national government actors resolve a matter that involves two counties without the involvement of those counties? Mr. Speaker, some of these things don't make sense. And you know, the Constitution is very clear that any legislation that goes against the provisions of any section of the Constitution is null and void to the extent of the conflict. So at that point, Mr. Speaker, to the extent that water is a devolved function and people are supposed to be arbitrating and resolving disputes on matters water in counties, those people, they don't consist of players from counties. To that extent, then this law falls flat on its face. The Speaker, the second matter is on the bulk water supply. The Speaker, this is also very ridiculous. The provisions here are very ridiculous because it is very clear in the Water Act of 2016 that bulk water supply is a function of water service providers. Now, this amendment seeks to remove that function from water service providers, including the Laikipia water service provider, from Laikipia and bring it to Nairobi under what they are calling waterworks development agencies. The Speaker, how now will national government agencies be able to regulate and manage and do reticulation of bulk water in the 47 counties in this country? The Speaker, this thing doesn't make sense. Again, the Speaker, to the extent that this provision violates the Constitution, this law, this amendment, must fall flat on its face. The Speaker, as I conclude my submission, let me just remind my colleagues that it should actually concern us that an amendment to the Water Act should come from the National Executive. To the extent that that amendment is coming from the National Executive, a ministry of the National Executive, that alone must concern us as a Senate. And as it concerns us, we should also challenge the Council of Governors. These colleagues of ours from the other side, because they are colleagues, Mr. Speaker, because we are elected from the same counties with them. At times, I know of senators here who garner even more votes than their governors. But when they get there, they start behaving funny. The Speaker, they should wake up from their slumber and help push legislation that ring-fences functions that are devolved. If there are issues with water service providers, I expect the Council of Governors to be at the forefront in pushing for legislation to ring-fence the operations of water service providers. It shouldn't be the function of the National Executive to try and cure a mischief found in the water service providers. And I don't know how these national government agencies will be able to resolve the disputes within and amongst water providers in counties without involving the service providers in those counties. So, Speaker, with those remarks, I oppose.
Thank you. Senator Okech, I can see you are again on the queue and you have already spoken to this bill. Senator Wamatinga, Wahome. Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand to support this bill with amendments. Mr. Speaker, sir, I sit in the Water and Lands Committee where this bill has been discussed. We've held various public participation with various stakeholders who have expressed their reservations, some their support, and some of the amendments that needs to be done. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know the Kenya Kwanza government intends to make water a tradable commodity. And therefore, it is important to come up with a framework that makes water business bankable business. As good as that may be, Mr. Speaker, it is also important to note that water supply, being a devolved function, the county governments which have been starved of the budget from the line ministry, they are left to do the reticulation. Some of them rely on very odd infrastructure, which have seen some counties lose as much as 70% in terms of non-revenue water. Mr. Speaker, sir, to be able to address this, we must come up with a comprehensive solution, which means that because some of the water infrastructure goes close counties, we need to have water development agencies, which as envisaged in the Act of 2016, so that the issues of those water bodies that are closing counties can be addressed. It is also not lost to us, Mr. Speaker, sir, that development of water infrastructure is quite a costly affair. Some of the mega dams that are proposed by the KK government cannot be realized within our budgetary allocation. Looking at the balance sheet of this country, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we come with options that will make this realizable. And that one is one of the ways to make water a tradable commodity, as electricity is, as roads are. Mr. Speaker, sir, having said that, it is also important to note that water being a devolved function, we need to reinforce the operationalization of the Act of 2016 by empowering the water service providers. This cannot be done, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the kind of a small budgetary allocation that they get. Therefore, it is important for us to change the way the approach we've been using. We must be deliberate on having a paradigm shift in the way that we approach the financing of this infrastructure. Left to the counties, Mr. Speaker, some counties will never be able to provide their citizens with water because the budgetary allocation and the infrastructure, and some of them even the technology required, is not available at that level. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we come up with a law that will ensure that the national government is able to provide the bulk water, and this can then be transferred now to the service providers who can then be able to liquidate it for consumption. The same applies for irrigation, Mr. Speaker. We know, like the High Grand Falls Dam that's proposed in the Rakanithi County, costing about 500 billion. There is no way that county, which receives just a couple of billions, will be able to ever realize that. But looking at the benefits, the long-term benefits, looking at water as a tradable commodity, looking at the benefits of such a dams, it is important that we put a legal framework in place that will encourage investors to come in the country, or even local business people to team up and be able to put up mega dams that will have several advantages. We know, taking for example like the High Grand Falls, it will be producing about 1,000 megawatts. That alone, Mr. Speaker, sir, would be enough revenue to pay for the cost of the construction of the dam, not to mention about thousands of acres that will be brought under irrigation. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, as much as we in the Senate are here to protect devolution, promote devolution, and see devolution work, we must also be pragmatic enough to realize that some of the functions that are supposed to be devolved cannot be achieved with the kind of small budgets that are allocated. And we also must also be alive to the fact that some of the functions, especially in the water development in infrastructure, we have close-cutting issues that lies in multiple counties. The mega dams, like now the one, the High Grand Falls, will serve several counties. Therefore, putting a legal framework in place that will be able to govern the construction and later the repayment of the cost of the dam needs to be anchored in a law. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, can only be done if we amend the act as it currently constituted to introduce other factors. However, we must also hold at the back of our mind that the function of water being devolved, that the role of the county government is well enhanced, well anchored, while also ensuring that the county governments will leap from the tradable water commodity. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support with amendments.
Thank you. Next is Senator Olekina Ledama. The minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it going on? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to make some comments, which I hope will lead me towards drafting some amendments to this bill, which in my view has been crafted to be able to commercialize a commodity that is given to us by God for free. Mr. Speaker, I sit in the Public Investment Committee, where we interrogate waterworks, we interrogate water service providers. So I'll be speaking with experience when I comment on this bill. If you read the objects and memorandum of this bill,
Sorry, Senator Rekina. Senator Manzo. Senator Manzo. Senator Manzo. Senator Kajwang. You are kindly consulting law tones. You're interrupting those contributing to this important bill. Honorable Rekina.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your protection. Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, I sit in the Public Investment Committee, where I get an opportunity to interrogate water service providers, waterworks bodies, in line with the Water Act 2016. Mr. Speaker, when you read these amendments, which are brought about by the Majority Leader of the National Assembly, there's a lot that leads to be desired. Mr. Speaker, why am I saying that? If you read the object and memorandum of this amendment, it is purely to operationalize the public-private partnership of the water bodies or the water resource. When you read the Constitution, water is devolved. There is nowhere in the Constitution that says that water should be a matter that is dealt centrally. And the framers of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, were very right, because only local people will be able to understand the specific needs of water of their own people. If you now take the powers from the county governments and you bring them to Nairobi, number one, there will be a lot of bureaucracy. People will not be able to make decisions in terms of the needs of the water. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I've heard my good friend, the Chair of Energy, saying that county governments will not have budgets to be able to deal with these issues. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about the issue of bulk water management, if there's water in Murang'a County and the people of Nairobi are benefiting from that water of Murang'a County, because we are the house that defend devolution and the framers of the Constitution, unless my good chair wants to amend the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution devolved water. The best thing we can do is to empower the county government of Murang'a to ensure that they sell that water to the people of Nairobi. It is not quantum physics. It is very simple. You have bulk water. If you have dilapidated infrastructure, I will fix my infrastructure up to the borderline. You want to collect my water, Mr. Speaker, collect it from the borderline, go and distribute it to your people. This business of creating these authorities, which are really bankrupting this nation, if you go to all state departments, Mr. Speaker, right now, it is not that the national budget gives them so much money. Most of them are given loans by the World Bank. They are given loans by the IMF. They are given loans by other development agencies for them to be able to go and sit somewhere in Naivasha and make decisions about people in Narok or how much water they should get. Mr. Speaker, we are missing the point here. This is not only unconstitutional, but it is creating bureaucracies on managing everything, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this Kenya Kwanza government really shocks me. You know, every time I sit down here and I read, you know, you look at, even if this bill was due, or this act was due to, for it to be amended.
Rekina, there is a point of order from Senator Derito John Kinyua. What is your point of order, Senator Kinyua?
Mr. Speaker, I have listened to Senator Olekina, who I respect so much. I don't know he's casting...
Which is standing order that you are using to
Mr. Speaker, Senator Wamatinga, when he finished his statement, he said, with amendment. So I don't know, he's not agree.
What is your point? Which standing order now are you using to prosecute?
Standing order number 110, Mr. Speaker, that if what Matangi said, he's just agreeing with him because he's assuming that Senator Matangi made a mistake. Well, Senator Matangi is very
Senator
clear
Wamatinga.
with
Wamatinga.
sorry, with all respect.
Matinga.
No, yeah, I'm sorry, it's Senator Matinga.
Maybe
Senator,
wishing him also the
it's
same
true,
blessing.
it's true, Mr. Speaker. But Senator Wamatinga was very clear when he said he's supporting with amendment concerning the issue of water is devolved. He's very clear about devolution with water, Mr. Speaker. I just want clarification so that he does not want to assume, he doesn't want to say that Senator Wamatinga does not
Senator
respect
Olekina to clarify.
water is devolved, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina, proceed, and if you have to clarify, I don't know, I did not...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my point is very clear, and I just want to be very, very clear. You know, we are debating, so it's for me to either agree or reject. And in my debate, I just pointed out clearly that what my good friend, the chair of energy, has said does not hold any water, because he said county governments do not have budgets to be able to control their resources. And I said, even the national government is relying on the IMF and the World Bank to borrow loans. And the object and memorandum of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is very clear. And I hope that my good friend, the commissioner, can be able to read it. It says, the principal object of the bill is to amend the Water Act 2016 for the purpose of operationalizing public-private partnership in the water sector. And I said, which I continue, that I have a serious problem with the policies of this Kenya Kwanza government, because everything has become commercial. Mr. Speaker, the power that now are being given to the cabinet secretary here, and the cabinet secretary does not really care about county government of Meru.
There is another point of order from Senator Wamatinga Wahome.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I just wanted to inform my colleague that I did not say that the county government do not have the budget. I said with the kind of allocation that the county governments get, that is point of information, with the kind of allocation that the county governments
Has
get.
he accepted that?
Yes, he has accepted. Yes, he's accepted.
Mr. Speaker, you know, my chair, him and I just came out from another committee where we were concerned about the cabinet secretary's decision and the powers that they have. But that's for another day. Let me try and summarize my points as follows. Mr. Speaker, I firmly believe that it's about time, with the help of the Secretariat, that we set up a committee that scrutinizes bills that are seconded to this House from the National Assembly. And I say that because of the experience of the bills that we send from this House to the National Assembly. Most of the bills that we send from this House to the National Assembly, some of them either do not get concurrence, and those that get concurrence are not prioritized. In fact, most of the time, they are sent to the budget office for them to look at it. They look at the implication. So I think in the same spirit, we should also be looking at the constitutionality of legislation proposals that are brought from the National Assembly. We should not be quick to debate them and to pass them. Because the first thing we should have seen is that the Constitution, under Section 4, Roman numeral number 11, that county governments, the county public works and services, including water and sanitation services, are devolved. So unless you're telling us that you're going to amend this Constitution, or you're going to throw this Constitution out of the way, there's absolutely no way that these amendments will be able to hold. If we are pushed to pass these amendments, someone will go to court, and someone will ask the same question that I'm asking here today. Why can't we not empower Murang'a County, which is providing water to Nairobi County, to be able to sell that water and make money for the people of Murang'a? Why should we create another body that has the powers to borrow money so that it continue dipping us deeper into the hole of debt. Mr. Speaker, the advantage of leaving water services, the county governments, are very clear. It allows for proper public participation. It allows for the people on these counties to be able to get water because they know they are the only ones who understand their needs of water. Now, if you tell me that decisions will be made in Nairobi, with all this bureaucracy, by the time water is distributed in Narok, you know, a child would have already finished primary school and gone to high school. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill is ill-advised. I think we need to start thinking about the future of this nation. One thing which I want us to remember is that governments come and go. Politicians come and go. But this country called Kenya must remain and will always remain. So this year, since we have agreed to be able to debate issues, pass legislation that will be able to support this nation, we must come up with amendments to the law that will be future-centric. It will not be laws that will be able to enrich a few individuals. Because the moment you say, that you are now going to empower, because it says that amendment to Clause 6 of the bill on Section 69 Act provides clarity roles between waterworks development agencies and water service provider. What clarity are you seeking there? Water service providers are based in counties. These water agencies that you're giving them so much power, really, what do they do? It's just busybodies. People just sitting down somewhere and making decisions about water in Mandera, and they are not even in Mandera, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to beseech my colleagues that one, either we stop the debate on this bill, we look at the constitutionality of this bill, because it is affecting our counties. And we're here to protect and defend counties. We need to start thinking about how to promote innovations and flexibility. If we take away a resource from the counties and we now bring it to the central government or the national government to make decisions, how then are we going to become innovative? How are we going to promote, flexibility in terms of managing water resources, which are based locally? You'll find that it's very difficult. Someone will get water, but instead of sharing that water with the local community, they will just, because they're afraid of these waterworks, they will just use that water for themselves. They'll never say it. Yet these waterworks do not have the powers. So this issue of private-public partnership must stop. It is not always the right thing. If you tell me that you're building me a superhighway from Nairobi to Kakamega, and you are inviting private-public partnership on a BOT, build, operate, transfer, I'll support it. But if you're now telling me that you want to commercialize water, that you are bringing in a private party to come in and invest in that water, and then distribute that water, use that water, which is a resource that the county is supposed to be benefiting, I will say no to it. Because you will say you'll actually just throw away innovation. Let's allow, we keep on talking about not having jobs in this country. So instead of these 47 heads of counties sitting down together and saying, how do we manage this resource? We in Parliament are now promoting, clawing back on devolution. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying local communities have a better understanding of their specific water needs, and by leaving these water services as intended by the framers of the Constitution in the county governments, will help them tailor the management of this water resource to fit their needs. So, Mr. Speaker, I oppose this bill entirely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next is Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohamed.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii kuchangia msaada wa marekebisho wa sheria ya maji ya mwaka 2016. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza ningejiunga na wenzangu ambao wametangulia kwa kusema kwamba napinga marekebisho haya, kwa sababu maji ni haki ya msingi ya kila mwanadamu, na kwa Wakenya ni katika haki zetu za msingi. Kwa hivyo mswada huu unajaribu kuweka maji kama biashara ambayo itasababisha wananchi wa Kenya kukosa maji na vile vile pia kupata tabu katika kupata maji. Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia mfumo wa sasa, kwa mfano kule Pwani kuna Coast Water Services ambayo inamilikiwa na serikali kuu. Halafu katika kila county kuna shirika ambalo linatoa maji, linauza maji, ambayo kwa mfano Mombasa ni Mombasa Water and Sewerage Services, ambazo wananunua maji kutoka kwa Coast Water na wanauzia wananchi wa Kenya. Mheshimiwa Spika, wananchi wa Mombasa. Mheshimiwa Spika, iwapo huu mswada utapita, ina maana kwamba Coast Water Services Board watakuwa na uhuru wa kuuza maji yale kwa wingi kwa mtu binafsi ama kwa shirika la kibinafsi, na wale ndio watakuja kuuzia wananchi kwa bei ambayo ni ya juu. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sasa asilimia kubwa ya wakazi wa Mombasa hawapati maji, kwa sababu kwanza maji yanayokuja yenyewe kutoka chemchemi ya Savo ni kidogo, na yale yanayotoka Malindi pia ni kidogo. Kwa hivyo haikimu mahitaji ya watu wa Mombasa. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mswada huu iwapo itapita, itatoa nafasi kubwa kwa wawekezaji wa binafsi kuuza maji kwa bei ya juu, na kwa vile maji ni kitu cha muhimu kwa maisha ya binadamu, Mheshimiwa Spika, hiyo itakuwa ni kinyume na usalama wa nchi, kwa sababu wananchi wakikosa maji, hiyo itaathiri usalama wao na usalama wa nchi kwa jumla. Mheshimiwa Spika, jambo la pili ni kwamba kuna shirika ambalo linaitwa Water Storage Authority. Tukiangalia kwa sasa kila sehemu, hakuna sehemu ambayo tunaweza kusema wanaweza kupata maji kwa masaa 24 siku 7 kwa wiki. Kaunti zote, hata Murang'a pia wana changamoto za kuweza kutekeleza hiyo. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, twaunda shirika la kuhifadhi maji, kustore maji. Litakuwa na kazi gani Mheshimiwa Spika? Tukiangalia kwa mfano kule Pwani, chemchemi ya Savo imekuwa hivyo, ina pipe moja kutoka 1945 ilipoanzishwa mpaka sasa 2024. Serikali imeshindwa kuweka hata pipe moja kutoka Savo kuja kwa mfano Voi, ama kuja Mombasa, ama kuja Kilifi. Wakati Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiangalia makazi yamekuwa ilivyokuwa 1945 Mheshimiwa Spika, si kama ilivyo leo, kwa sababu ukiangalia kuna miji kadhaa imeweza kukua kutoka Savo, kutoka Mtito wa Ndei Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa sababu chemchemi ya Mzima Mheshimiwa Spika iko nyuma ya Mtito wa Ndei. Kwa hivyo kutoka hapo Mheshimiwa Spika, tukiangalia barabara mpaka Mombasa, kuna miji mingi ambayo imeweza kukua kutoka 1945 mpaka sasa, na wote hawa wanategemea pipe moja hiyo ya Mzima Springs. Kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, hakuna haja ya kuwa na shirika ambalo litakuwa linahifadhi haya maji, kwa sababu tumeona kwamba kwa sasa hakuna maji ya kutosha ya kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba kila binadamu au kila mwananchi na wanyama pia katika mbuga zetu za wanyamapori wanapata maji ya kutosha kwa matumizi yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, napinga mswada huu na nitakomea hapo. Asante kwa kunipa fursa hii.
Senator Edwin Sifuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to begin by stating that I stand to oppose the bill in its entirety. I will start with the principal object of the bill, Mr. Speaker. I have a problem with the principal object of the bill. The principal object of the bill is stated to be operationalization of private-public partnerships in the water sector. Mr. Speaker, we in Nairobi here have had a taste of perhaps the most famous public-private partnership in the country today, and that is the expressway between Mlolongo and Westlands. Many of the people who can afford to use a toll road will tell you that it has improved their lives. But for the many people in Nairobi who cannot afford to pay toll, I can tell you that the feedback is that the expressway has actually made commuting between Mlolongo and Westlands on the old road extremely difficult and even harder than it was before the expressway was built. Mr. Speaker, this is in addition to a debate we had here last year where the public had to fork out extra money. I think it was about 19 billion shillings for the rehabilitation of the old Mombasa Road. This is after the private partnership was already in operation and the people with money were enjoying the services of the expressway because they could afford it. Mr. Speaker, I am not against privatization per se, and privatization is not bad in every instance. But I honestly believe that there are some sectors and some things that we should not privatize because of the negative effect it has on the public sector delivery of those same services. I remember when privatization of education began, and many will argue for and against privatization in the education sector, but the general consensus, at least from my perspective, is that it has had a negative effect on service delivery in the public sector. Mr. Speaker, it is also arguable whether privatization of healthcare has resulted in better services, especially in the public sector. Anytime you introduce commercial interest in essential services, Mr. Speaker, the public service, the free service always suffers. So here we are discussing privatization in the water sector. Privatization in the water sector, for me, is undesirable for many reasons. But, Mr. Speaker, those who said water is life knew what they were talking about. If you cannot afford water, you basically cannot afford life. If we are going to be made to pay for life, which is essentially what we are being told is going to happen with the privatization of water, then we are making life itself more expensive and more unbearable. I will give you the example of the water demand in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. As of March 2022, our daily demand in Nairobi is 810 million liters per day. Mr. Speaker, this is against the installed supply capacity of 550 liters a day. We have a deficit of 260 million liters for the residents of Nairobi. Now, you imagine, Mr. Speaker, a situation where at least this 550 million liters of water a day is assured, not even assured, at least it is there on paper for the people of Nairobi. Now, with the passage of this bill, because it is assured because it is in the hands of the public sector, it is in the hands of Nairobi City Water Sewerage Company, which is an entity owned by the county government of Nairobi, which is an entity that belongs to the people of the county of Nairobi. Now, this bill passes and it says that a private entity, people with capacity and money, people with muscle, can be able to come and say, out of the 550 liters of water that Nairobi gets a day, we have the capacity to buy half of that amount of water. Say 200 million liters per day goes with a private entity because that is what you have empowered them to do through the bulk purchases that are being proposed in this amendment. What that does is that the public can only rely on Nairobi Water to supply 300,000 liters of water per day because 200,000 are now in the hands of a private company. Then what happens to that private company? Those private companies will not prioritize the majority of the people of Nairobi who cannot afford to buy water, even at the current rates that have been imposed by the Nairobi City County Water and Sewerage Company. Mr. Speaker, you will be commercializing life itself in this city so that those with the capacity to buy the water, just like the people who can be able to afford to fly over the poor on the expressway in Nairobi are doing right now, will be able to purchase all the water that is available in Nairobi, and the people will suffer, the ordinary people who are the majority in this county. Mr. Speaker, this is why I'm saying that this is one of those areas that should not be commercialized, that in fact it is an essential service You must distinguish between essential services and other services. The people of Nairobi can survive in traffic, but you cannot survive without water, Mr. Speaker. Number two, there is no provision, having painted that picture, Mr. Speaker, there is no provision that will then determine that or put in place a mechanism for equity. Yes, you have the financial muscle to buy all the water in Nairobi, but should we allow you to do it because you have the capacity to do it? What happens to all the other people who are not able to be loaded onto this private entity that will be supplying water? So the equity mechanism, I don't see it in the bill. It would have been nice if they were told that for you to get that commercial enterprise, you must develop extra capacity. Extra capacity has to be developed first before we give you contracts to supply water commercially. But if they are coming to eat into the already or the current installed capacity, which I've already demonstrated to you, already has a deficit, then we're going to have problems, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I had opportunity to have a conversation at some point with the Director General of the Nairobi City Water County, Water and Sewerage Board, Engineer Muguna. And he tried to explain to me, now that this is already a scarce commodity, how do you determine who gets water and who doesn't? And there is a very complex matrix that they use there, Mr. Speaker. Of course, you will see that they will prioritize important security installations. They will prioritize the CBD because they want to encourage businesses to happen. You don't want major conferences happening at, say, the KICC, international conferences, and then there's no water in the CBD. You don't want to have a situation that you don't have water at your international airports, for instance. You have seen the outrage that follows when there is a blackout at JKIA. The same for water because it's an essential commodity. And then you come to the regions in Nairobi. Who gets water on which day? Who doesn't get water on what day? Because we are already facing a deficit, Mr. Speaker. So this commercialization, I believe, is going to make Engineer Muguna's work even worse. If you take away any single drop of water from the capacity that is installed right now, the people at Nairobi Water are going to have a problem on who gets water on which days and who doesn't get water, and there are going to be people who will not get water at all, simply because the commercial interests, the commercial entities that will be running that water supply will be determining who gets that water, and it is going to be a commercial relationship. If you have the money, you will get the water every time in the quantities that you want. But if you are not able to afford, you are on your own. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, there is a concern about the loss of revenue to the entities that are owned by the county government. Mr. Speaker, loss of revenue also translates to loss of jobs. Many workers currently working at the county-owned water services companies are concerned, Mr. Speaker, that once you shift a bulk of the supply of water to private hands, there is no guarantee that their jobs will continue to be tenable. It is very possible that we are staring at job losses. And there is no mechanism in the bill, as currently drafted, Mr. Speaker, to ring fence or to protect the people currently working at Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company, so that after these commercial contracts have been signed, after the water is now in private hands, after these private companies are the ones running the water business, is there any guarantee that the people working for the Nairobi County Water and Sewerage Company will continue to be in employment? I have not seen that assurance in the bill. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the question of infrastructure that has been touched on by some of my colleagues. We have already worked and invested a lot of money as a county in Nairobi to put in place the infrastructure, not just for the collection of water, but actually for the distribution of water. Is there any provision in the bill that assures us that the commercial interests, the commercial companies, once they take over the bulk water, will develop their own distribution infrastructure? Will that infrastructure be flying on top of our existing infrastructure the way that the expressway does? What is it going to do to the infrastructure that already exists? If there are disruptions in service because of ongoing construction of parallel infrastructure, who is going to bear the cost of repairs? Are we going to be told again as taxpayers in Nairobi to bear the cost of repairs to our existing infrastructure because of construction of new infrastructure, just like we were told to bear the cost of repairing the old Mombasa Road? I have not been assured in the current bill that any of those things have been thought about. Mr. Speaker, I had my governor, Johnson Sakaja, just recently in a church service, saying that we have secured as a city 15 billion shillings for new water projects, which is to increase the capacity of the city county to be able to provide this precious commodity. I don't know where that leaves us. Is this 15 billion shillings supposed to be for the people of Nairobi, for the development of the capacity of Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company? Or we are doing this so that we can be able to enable private entities to come in as suppliers of water? Mr. Speaker, there's a project that is ongoing called the Northern Collector Tunnel. At the completion of the first phase, we are expecting an additional 140 million liters of water per day. That is going to maybe dent the deficit of 220 million liters a day by about half. There is still need for development of further capacity for the people of Nairobi to enjoy water on a daily basis in the quantities that they desire. What is going to happen if this bill becomes law? Mr. Speaker, I want to stop there because I am not convinced. I am not convinced, in addition to the questions raised by my colleagues about the fact that this being a devolved function, the national government is overreaching. It's overreaching in its attempt to manage the water sector, yet the fourth schedule of the Constitution specifies water and water services as a devolved function. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I stand to oppose the bill in its entirety, and I've heard people telling us that if you are unhappy with provisions of the bill, you can bring amendments. I am one of those people who has brought amendments to bills that I thought were unfavorable, unconstitutional, and overreaching in their provisions. But those very same amendments have been defeated here. And the question I'm asking myself, how do you amend something that is fundamentally flawed from the beginning? I want to convince my colleagues that please don't tell us to amend something that is unconstitutional. You don't amend something that is unconstitutional to make it constitutional. You throw it away, you throw it out. That is the only solution for unconstitutional provisions of a bill that, such as the one that we are dealing with here. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna. Senator Roba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to weigh in on this bill, on the Water Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, before I either oppose or support this bill, I want to say that my biggest worry with this bill is that we are taking away from devolution, that we are going back to centralizing matters that have already been devolved. When I read some of the amendments, particularly just a statement such as the one there on 2A, at the national government level, a state department, agency, or state corporation which intends to have its functions undertaken by a private party. We are basically saying that after the introduction of devolution and after devolving functions for purposes of efficiency such that the people on the county and the grassroots level are able to feel the effect of government, we are now going back to say, actually, no, let us now centralize back these matters. And not only are we centralizing it, it's also we want to commercialize it. Now, do I have a problem with it, with water being commercialized? I don't think the problem is water being commercialized. The question then becomes, by commercializing this service, are we actually bringing the cost down? Are we ensuring that now all the Kenyans in every single part of this country are receiving the water? That is the main question, because some people will say we don't want to commercialize it. But if you look at some of the things that we're dealing with under Kenya Power, we are always pushing to have it commercialized so that we can have competition, so that we can have so many other players to bring down the cost of electricity. So commercializing it is not the problem. The problem is, are we actually, in the guise of making amendments, centralizing back powers that have been devolved? and making the provision of water more expensive. Because when I read through this proposed bill, I tend to have a feeling that we are trying to even move it closer to the problems such as the KPLC problems that we have right now. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that provision of basic needs, water included there, being a basic need, we must ask ourselves whether we are amending for the interests of Kenyans or whether we are amending for the interests of very few players in a commercial space, Mr. Speaker. I have heard Senator Sifuna talking about the investment that national government and even county governments have put on infrastructure for provision of water. It takes me back to a time when we have been able to see certain individuals using government offices to go and give crazy proposals to seek loans for purposes of investment of infrastructure for whatever field. In this particular point, this agency that we want to create will have the power, the mandate to go out, seek loans, stating that they want to bring development in terms of infrastructure of water. But then how do we account and how do we make sure that those loans do not, trickle down to now the mwananchi? At the end of the day, you'll be told, now maji imepanda, the water has gone up because of the loans that we took on infrastructure. I think if we're talking about ensuring that water provision is being is effective down to the grassroots, then let us talk about all these amendments, but from a grassroots and a devolved perspective, such that if we're talking about having PPPs, private-public partnerships, let us talk about PPPs on a county, on a devolved unit, so that we are not losing the water service providers in terms of now centralizing them back to a national government and then having them negotiate with national government on provision of water to their people. Mr. Speaker, for me, it is imperative that the fundamental question here is, are we legislating for the interests of Kenyan people, for Kenyans, or the interest of a few individuals who want to commercialize a specific industry for their own benefit? Mr. Speaker, when I read some of the clauses in this bill, I just begin to wonder, first of all, why this bill originated from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, anytime we are proposing bills here in the Senate and they touch on issues to do with money, it is even the legal departments that will advise you that, Mheshimiwa, this bill you are trying to legislate is actually a money bill and should therefore originate from the National Assembly. In that same spirit, I am wondering why there is a bill that is touching on devolution and county assemblies originating from the National Assembly. Yet, the Senate is mandated to oversight issues on county assemblies and devolution. So it also, I then question, whoever, and with all due respect, because we are all legislators, why did this bill originate from the National Assembly? This is something that we should have been, as senators, been allowed to discuss at the Senate, because it touches particularly on devolved functions and on county assemblies and county governments, so that we can say, okay, yes, we need to make the space of water provision efficient for Kenyans. So let us sit down as legislators who are oversighting county governments and devolved units and talk about how to make water provision more effective for Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, I think having said that, when I stood, I was not sure whether I was supporting or I was opposing. I actually stood, I said, you know what, let me just speak my mind, and then maybe at the end of it I will know. But the more I speak and the more I put my points there, I know that this is a bill that has been fronted by the majority leader, and but I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I oppose this bill. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I have got communication to make with regards to our visiting institution. And in the public gallery, we have 48 students accompanied by 6 teachers from Lesirwo Secondary School in Kericho County who are undertaking an educational visit in the Senate. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving
So, Mr. Speaker, my pleasure, and I wish the young people well and a good stay in the Senate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Majority Whip. Senator Osotsi Godfrey Atieno, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that opportunity. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to declare that I'm going to oppose this bill. Mr. Speaker, I have had an opportunity as the chair of the County Public Investment and Special Funds Committee to have audit review sessions with over 80 water service providers in this country. And my committee has done a wonderful job to try and deal with the challenges that we have noted. And the challenges are not just management challenges, but also we have other challenges which, if addressed, will be able to sort out the problem we have had with the water provision in our counties. In these review meetings, Mr. Speaker, we have noted that the water service providers in our counties were seen to be autonomous from the county government because the Ministry of Water was dealing with the water service providers and overlooking the county governments successfully to take away ownership of these water companies from the boards of those water companies to the county governments. And Mr. Speaker, this has had a great effect on the issue of provision of water. One example, Mr. Speaker, a county where water service provision was being managed badly was your own county, Mr. Speaker. The other one was Muranga County, where cartels were running water companies without the involvement of county government. We have been able to take it back to the county government and made a raft of recommendations on how these water companies should run. Mr. Speaker, when I read this bill, all that efforts that we have done as a committee are going to waste. Because this bill tries to do the contrary. Mr. Speaker, because of the challenges that we noted when we were looking at the audit reports, we decided as a committee to do an inquiry on water investments in our counties. And we invited the regional waterworks companies. We have invited WASREB. We have invited WASPA, which is an association of water service providers. We have invited the Ministry of Water. We have invited the Treasury. We have invited the Attorney General. And Mr. Speaker, this Friday, we are going to have an engagement as a committee with the Council of Governors Committee on Water, where 7 governors are going to attend. And in this meeting, we are going to discuss what are the possible solutions of dealing with these challenges in the water sector. But Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that this bill is being rushed in this House, whereas a committee of this House is seeking solutions which it will bring to this House for debate. And this bill is running contrary to what we are doing. I want to give you an example, Mr. Speaker. We have the regional waterworks companies. We have the Rift Valley Waterworks, Central Rift Waterworks, North Rift Waterworks. We have Northern Kenya Waterworks. We have Lake Victoria North and Lake Victoria South. We have Coast Water. We have Tanathi. We have Athi Water. Mr. Speaker, I want to say in this House, following our engagement with this waterworks company, this regional waterworks company are a waste to this country. What they do, Mr. Speaker, is that they only sit there to get funding from donors. Then once the money comes, they build water projects without the engagement of counties, and then they purport to hand over those water projects to counties, just a mere letter. And in those agreements, governors are not involved in negotiating those agreements.
We wanted to find out how the situation differs from country to country, so we sent out our team of correspondents to find some answers. Here's what they brought back from Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya.
Brain drain has a mixed impact in Kenya. On the one hand, it takes highly skilled workers outside the country. On the other hand, they send large amounts of money back home. In 2022, remittances from Kenyans living abroad became the largest source of foreign exchange, amounting to $4.3 billion. In fact, Kenya's president announced that he hopes to double this number and export even more Kenyan workers. Kenyan data shows that migration increases with the level of education. Healthcare workers are some of the main professionals leaving Kenya for better jobs or further education. In fact, Kenyan healthcare workers went to the streets complaining about the lack of good and stable jobs, even though hospitals here are understaffed.
In 2022, Ghana's youth unemployment rate stood at 7.14%. Now, millions of young Ghanaians are constantly searching for new jobs. Many of them, sadly, including those with essential skills, only see themselves doing better outside Ghana.
When you stay at one place, it's like you are killing your career. But then once you take that very bold step, moving from your comfort zone and then stepping out, looking at the country like Germany, it's a place for the future.
Well, what excites me about the career opportunity is that at least you get to learn different views from other people. You get to learn new ideas, new technology, new languages and all that.
The key destination has been Europe and the Americas. In fact, Germany is second only to the United Kingdom as top destinations for the Ghanaian diaspora populations. Now, Ghana is also one of the countries the EU has constantly targeted with its migration reforms that focus on skilled labor. A migration center that offers counseling to young people seeking to travel has also been operational for some time now.
But our key focus now is providing advisory services for Ghanaians who have the expertise and are willing to work abroad.
With Ghana still struggling economically and not being able to create opportunities for many young people, migrating outside has become a necessity rather than a luxury for millions, including professionals.
In Uganda, the problem of brain drain exists. But because of poor documentation, it's hard to appreciate the real impact of this problem. Many professionals try and seek employment outside the country, mainly because of unemployment here and poor pay. But also traveling outside Uganda is not an easy attempt, mainly because of visa and travel restrictions. But the few who are lucky to find jobs outside Uganda, when they leave, some don't even want to come back.
That's an interesting point, right? People who leave don't want to come back. But what do you think? Do Africans who move abroad have an obligation to later return to their home countries? Or would you say they shouldn't even leave in the first place? Well, here's proof that this is a very controversial topic. My colleague Edith Kimani was in Lagos to find out what people there think. And here's our street debate.
Hello and welcome back to the 77%. This week we are back in Nigeria. And before we continue, I'd like you to picture something. Imagine living in a country where you feel completely frustrated by your government's efforts and feel absolutely no way out. What do you do? Well, for most Nigerians, they decide to japa, the Yoruba word for run. And so huge is this problem that recently elected President Tinubu asked people in the diaspora in the US to come back home and forget the frustrations of the previous government. But is this enough to allow the young people here to remain? That's the question we have today. And I'm going to begin with Samson. Now, you are one of the people who is saying that, look, this country is not really working out for me, and given the chance, I am taking the first flight out of here and never coming back. Why?
So I'm a digital entrepreneur. I think about me having solutions to many problems and then still trying to battle with infrastructure, thinking about power, thinking about my internet, thinking about infrastructure that will help me do many things. I wouldn't want to do that. I've had several challenges like this where I'm trying to do something, but I get into the environment, there's no Wi-Fi that can make me do stuff, there's no infrastructure that can give me an idea of what I want to do. It's very frustrating.
Okay, so let me hear from other people here, just the state of affairs in Nigeria at the moment. How would you describe it? Oludayo.
So the case of Nigeria, yeah, you might see things are not working right, but it's not beyond redemption. Nigeria is going to be a better place if we all contribute our parts to make it a better place.
Okay, so you say it's going to be a better place, but what is the situation presently?
Yes, there's a reason why we are a developing nation, right? We are not as developed